Good morning. You're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Jess De Los Santos. It's the start of a new trading day, but first, let's go straight to our top story. The government is now going after profiteers who have been jacking up prices of basic commodities in areas battered by Typhoon Odette. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez has the rest of the story.
A week after Typhoon Odette devastated several regions in Visayas and Mindanao, food, water, and fuel supply remained scarce. And now there are reports people are taking advantage by selling water and fuel for double or even triple regular price. Siargao tourist guide Mark Anthony Lim says gasoline is being sold from 100 to 150 pesos per bottle at this point.
Napabili ako ng gas na 120 sa bote. Pero wala ka na magagawa kasi wala ka ng gas.
Siargao is one of the areas that bore the brunt of Odette, with officials estimating up to 90% of the population were impacted. Lim says relief goods have come in, but it's still not enough.
Kung halimbawa, bibili ka ng bigas, di ka bibigyan. Kahit tubig man lang o pagkain na relief goods, okay na.
On Facebook, dozens of people are complaining about overpriced basic necessities. Like this photo of 500 milliliter water bottles being sold for 60 pesos. Normally, it's just 10 to 15 pesos a piece. In other typhoon-stricken areas like Cebu, a gallon of mineral water is being sold for as much as 130 pesos. This is despite the price freeze imposed on basic necessities after President Duterte placed regions 4B, 6, 7, 8, 10 and 13 under a state of calamity. The Department of Trade and Industry has already instructed its consumer protection groups and regional offices to go after profiteers.
We are advising them, submitingin yung government sa inyo. So let's not take advantage of the situation kasi mahirap na nga, papahirapin pa.
The Energy Department has also issued a warning.
We are calling the attention of retail outlets that are overpricing, that they are violating Section 52 of the Consumer Act. Merong administrative and criminal penalties po yan.
DTI is urging the public to report incidents of overpricing through its main Facebook page, DTI Philippines, or consumer care at dti.gov.ph. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, We Are One News.
The BSP expects agricultural production and tourism activities to face disruptions until next year after Typhoon Odette left a trail of destruction in its wake. Odette was the strongest typhoon to hit the country this year, packing strong winds that barreled through Visayas and Mindanao, killing 326 people as of the latest tally. The BSP's grim outlook draws upon the fact that the typhoon-hit areas represented 36% of the country's GDP as of 2020. That was even bigger compared to the 2013 super typhoon Yolanda, which ravaged areas that only represented 5% of GDP at the time. Not to mention, the deadly storm's onslaught came just when the local tourism sector was still finding its footing after the pandemic upended its workers and business model in the past 22 months. All right, time to see how shares are doing this shortened trading day on Christmas Eve. Let's try to take a look at this chart right here, showing you how shares are performing 6 minutes into the trading day. Not a good start to the session here, with shares a little change despite being on the downside here, down close to 0.1% to 7,244. Recall, of course, that yesterday shares snapped a 3-day losing streak as investors went on bargain hunting mode. Now, Phil Stock's Claire Alviar says improvement in Bloomberg ranking provided some positive sentiment here. That, of course, you have the Philippines up 3 spots in the index. That's after being at the bottom of the barrel for the 3 straight months. Luis Lim, being on Virginia Capital, says investors are also brushing aside Omicron worries. But this time, let's have a quick check on some specific stocks here with some major news. For one, let's kick things off with BPI. That's after it announced that its merger with its thrift unit, BPI Family Savings Bank, will take effect as we start 2022 on January 1st. They will commence post-merger activities on the first quarter with a target to conclude activities by the end of 2022. And you can see right here, Still, you have BPI on the downside here, losing or shedding as much as 0.5% to 91 pesos and 55 centavos. Now, from one lender to another, this time Union Bank, it has, of course, purchased Citigroup's consumer banking assets in the Philippines. That's for a cash plus premium of 45.3 billion pesos. That covers local credit card, unsecured lending, deposit, and investment businesses. However, as you can see right here, Union Bank also on the downside here, down 0.2% to 101 pesos a piece. Now, let's see how the two lenders are faring, at least when you compare to the rest of the main index here. You have still gainers beating decliners here. GT Capital is a day's best performer so far, up by 1.8%. A number of stocks here gaining more than a percent. There's AC Energy, Pure Gold, and Bloomberry on the downside. However, you have Metro Bank down 1.3%. Now let's cap things off with some acquisition news, and we have a couple of them. First is Century Pacific Foods snapping up Aligo Sardines. So that's going to include purchase of assets and intellectual property rights for Ligo products, according to Christopher Poe, Century Pacific Food chairman. Ligo will be highly synergistic with Century's marine products portfolio. Nowhere though an acquisition amount. As you can see right here, investors cheering that move. The stock is up 2.8% to 27 pesos and 15 centavos a piece. Lastly, let's have a quick check on Shakey's. The food operator is also on buying mode as it acquires Potato Corner. The deal is going to cover assets and intellectual property as well. The purchase also includes company-owned stores. Shakey's will now be the brand owner and franchisor both domestically and internationally. No details yet on the terms of the deal. As you can see right here, a whopping increase here for Shakey's, up by close to 13%, now at 10 pesos and 72 centavos a piece. Here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The Trade Department wants to prioritize the restoration of power, water, and telecommunication service in business districts damaged by Typhoon Odette. The Cebu IT BPM organization initially suggested that the government allocate more focused attention to business districts so that businesses can resume operations immediately. As of Wednesday, 80% of Cebu's IT BPM sector were down. But for IBPAP, companies should prioritize keeping every employee safe amid the ongoing chaos in hard-hit areas. Although the group assured that business continuity plans have also been activated in response to the disruption caused by the typhoon. The DA reports that Odette's damage to agriculture has now reached 3.5 billion pesos. That's higher than the NDRRMC's agricultural damage estimate of 2 billion pesos. The DA says more than 44,000 farmers and fishers were affected, with volume of production loss at almost 92,000 metric tons and 66,000 hectares of affected crop land. To help mitigate the situation, the Philippines Crop Insurance Corporation said it is setting aside about 828 million pesos for potential payouts to farmers and fisherfolk in storm-hit provinces. As the days go by, we're getting a clearer picture of how wide Typhoon Odette's damage is. How is this going to hold back the country's recovery? Let's get insights from AJ Montesa. He's an economic analyst over at Action for Economic Reforms. Good morning, AJ. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, first, how is this going to dent our growth and recovery?
All right. So before Odette, we were already very optimistic about the growth in 2021 and even moving into 2022. But as mentioned earlier, the regions and areas affected by Odette account for about 36% of our GDP. So it's likely to put a dent into our recovery. I know that areas like Surigao were affected, but some major economic hubs were also affected, like Cebu and Bohol. So those areas are expected to be were expected to be part of our recovery plan as well. So in terms of sectors, I think our main sectors that will be affected are tourism in Surigao, for example, and agriculture in Western Visayas.
Mhm. Now, of course, the government is hoping to hit at least a 5 to 5.5% growth in 2021. Is the recent typhoon going to affect that in any way?
Right. So again, I think 5% was the forecast for the fourth quarter and for the entire 2021. We might see a lower figure as a result of Odette. Right now, we're still accounting for the damage that it's going to do on our economy. But right now, supply lines are affected, infrastructure and communication are affected. So it's expected to have a dent in that figure. So maybe in the upper 4.5% figure, it's likely. But thankfully, it happened in the latter days of the fourth quarter. Hopefully, the government can also have a faster relief response to this, to bring communications back up, to bring infrastructure back up. And right now, we also have an open credit line with the World Bank, if I'm not mistaken, that we can use in times of calamity. So I think the government should be able to maximize that so that we can have a quicker recovery from this.
Okay, also, of course, before Typhoon Odette, a number of economists and analysts at the same time, even our economic managers, were begging a return to pre-pandemic growth by the last quarter of 2022. Is this going to hold up that possible return to pre-pandemic levels?
Right.
And
One of the
by
strategies
how long do you expect this to delay that?
Yeah, one of the strategies in many of the regions affected was supposed to be tourism, right? So I think given the impact of Odette, our tourism industry is really going to be hard hit in those areas. I think they're going to experience the brunt of that downturn in tourism. So their expected recovery in terms of the pandemic might not be as fast, and it will really depend on how fast we're able to bring up our infrastructure back up to how it was before Odette.
Of course, another concern would be price pressures. How is this going to affect the country's inflation picture?
Yeah, of course, in those areas, those areas will be the most hard hit when it comes to consumer prices. It will really depend on how quickly we can get supply lines back up, how quickly we can get roads and bridges back up. If we can clear the debris from those areas, that will help ease pressures on inflation. But as of right now, again, we can already see instances of price gouging and people taking advantage of that. So I hopefully the government can do its part to fast track delivery of relief goods in that area, and also to clear supply lines so that eventually it will ease the inflationary pressure.
Okay, other than that, of course, there's another concern here. The country has already detected 3 cases of the Omicron variant. Should we be worried? Is this going to be another worrisome picture here, especially for the country's recovery?
Right. So last time that I was invited to the show, I was also asked about the Omicron, and I'd like to reiterate again that it's still important to be cautious, especially with the different variants. So it's important to still employ yung social distancing natin, yung pagsuot natin ng masks. But the initial findings or studies have been showing that Omicron is not as deadly as the Delta variant. So I think that's why also we have been more optimistic when it comes to our forecasts for 2021 and 2022, because the Omicron variant might not be as hard-hitting as the Delta variant that really hampered our economy in the past year. So I think there's a part of the economy that has reason to be optimistic. Our consumer spending is going up, especially now in the fourth quarter of the holiday season. 2022 is also an election year, so typically we expect that consumer spending will really go up and there will be a stimulus towards our economy. So I think there are signs that point towards optimistic trends in our economy moving forward.
Okay, this time around, let's discuss about a Public Service Act here. Of course, that has already hurdled the Senate. Your thoughts on that measure?
Yes, I think that the passage of the PSA, or the Public Service Act, is a positive development. It will help steer new investments in our economy. It will also create an environment for a better quality of public services. So I think in general, it's a good reform that was passed. Hopefully, we can take advantage of it and attract new investors into the country that will help boost our economy as well.
But there are, of course, some concerns raised, especially regarding opening up the telecommunications industry, with concerns, of course, over a possible interference from other countries. Your thoughts on that as well, AJ?
Right. So I think baked into the provisions of the PSA are several safeguards that would likely protect us from any intervention. Again, it's just a matter of exercising the proper oversight. But in general, I think the law that it reformed, again, the existing law before this, the PSA was passed in the Commonwealth era, in the American period, in the 1913s, 1910s, 1920s. So I think it was an overdue reform. It's a reform that was needed to really modernize our public services. And I think in general, there are more pros than cons when it comes to this reform.
Again, of course, the hope is that enough safeguards are indeed in place to safeguard, of course, the country's interests. Thank you very much for your time this morning. AJ Montesa, economic analyst over at Action for Economic Reforms. Thank you, AJ. Stay safe and Merry Christmas.
Thanks for having me. Merry Christmas, everyone.
And before we end our broadcast today, many of our kababayans in the provinces hit by Typhoon Odette have no food and no water. They have lost their homes and some have lost loved ones. Let's make them feel the spirit of Filipino bayanihan. You may send your donations through the following channels now being flashed on your screens. Let's make them feel that through this pandemic, through this devastation, tuloy pa rin ang Pasko. And that's the first look into the business day this Friday, December 24, 2021. Catch Businessworld Live for the market close at 3:15 p.m. today. I'm Jess De Los Santos and Beer One News. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.